the idea that how could we even begin a discussion about adult Jewish learning unless we have some notion of what it is that we're trying to achieve. And the idea of bringing the people together at this panel was to give us some food for thought in how we approach this very question of what would it look like if we were successful. If we were successful in creating meaningful opportunities for adult Jewish learning, what might the world look like? And our panelists this evening are going to offer their views on this very interesting question.
The group of people that I have been investigating for the past 7 years and that I live with fit this description almost, if you don't, I mean, it wasn't clear to me whether an educated public needs rational bases or purely rational bases of justification or not. It wasn't clear. But you certainly had a community, in Israel, there are communities of discourse, significant communities of discourse, which can be described according to these criteria as an educated public. The Dati Leumi community that I've been a part of and that I have been researching on and off for the past 7 years is definitely an educated public. So what I'd like to do here, so I'm making 2 points. A is that successful adult Jewish education makes for an engaged, educated public across sectorial lines. And B, a successful program in adult Jewish education is always relative to the context. And it need not necessarily include so-called Jewish content, content written as in the square letters, right? It could include Latin letters or other stuff. Okay, enough.
Learning is not part of that identity. It's what will constitute that identity. And this is why you cannot do with the Daf Yomi, etc. There are pressures of meaning. The last thing a student of the Daf Yomi asks us is whether it's meaningful. So when you orient yourself to those distinctions and pressures, etc., which make it different than just the mere Talmud Torah activity, not mere, chas v'shalom, but the Talmud Torah activity, then you will have to orient yourself to another form of curriculum and another form of concept that will be very attuned to a very particular role of studying in a particular moment of Jewish life, which is very unique. So that's...
My kind of educational hopes, if not worse than hopes, is that once I'm able to let those people that are really building the public space marinate in those texts, the text will come out, and I see it happen in the music, on television, in the ads, with the newspaper reporters, and when they own the language, the text will not be something that you learn that used to be, but it will give the language of what is going to happen in Israel. And I'm looking forward. There's so much creativity and originality, even in creative ads in the papers or on television. I look at them and they do wonders with language, but it's very thin because it's still, Israeliness, like born from the sand. And if you can think of them owning the language and then using sense of humor and creativity and things that are relevant for what happens today and tomorrow, that is for me a vision of an interesting, happy, like high standard of living Jewishly, which is really the reason why I want to live in this country, because you can play with the words on television and not necessarily everybody understands it, but I know that they mean something that is coming out of Nedarim.
Now, does adult learning create the possibility of a shared dialogue because the social and political issues are checked at the door? Might it engender, say, here in Israel, something like social and political shifts change? And then similarly, for so many adult education initiatives in the States, are we trying to socialize people into being loyal members of the federation structure? Are we trying to give them the tools that will enable them to challenge some of the received ideas in Jewish institutional organizational life? These are a few things that occurred to me as I hear you all, and I'd be curious to hear what you think.
I would make a distinction between epos and politics. I don't think if you are a non-epic person, it does mean you're an apolitical person. I mean, I think there is something about the epic character that avoids politics in a destructive way. The politics of Daled Amot Shel Halacha is a good litvak, you know. And by the way, it's not apropos the national religious community. The more epic they were, the less learning they were. There was an anti-intellectual trend there, very deep, but which may be changing. I'm not sure.
I myself feel that my life was completely changed, and the whole way I see this place has completely changed. And the fact that now people that don't speak Hebrew or live in an Orthodox Haredi world or wherever, when we share the text, the differences don't disappear. But we share some kind of narrative, excuse me for the postmodern term, we share something that is solid enough to hold a serious discussion about what keeps us apart.
I think what we need to clarify to ourselves, first of all, what kind of vision of our communities we would like to see here and all over the world. And then what is the gap between our vision and between reality, and then ask ourselves if the whole new trend of adult education can help us filling this gap. And Ruthie had a thesis. We have to clarify to ourselves what is the vision, and then how do we can fill this gap.
What is the place in terms of adult Jewish learning to enable adult Jews not to think what we want them to think, but to think for themselves?
I feel the world in this country has changed while I was hoping for it to, and so I maybe because I'm not in the Orthodox community, I don't feel the borders so close to me. The world is open, and the people that are doing television are coming to talk about issues in the plot that they want to figure out, and they want to know how text can help them, and I just feel grateful.
At least from what I see, it might be of a magnitude if you say, well, there was in the Second Temple period, to a certain degree, there was a monopoly of the priests over Torah that was extended to the rest of the males through rabbinic effort, and that created a dramatic transformation of Torah and everything we understand by Torah. Maybe such a thing will happen with expanding expanding the learning community to include women. That will be of that sort of magnitude. It's too early to say. It's really too early, but it has the potential, the most interesting, deep potential in that respect.
What fueled the peace process in large part was integration into the world capitalist economy, which Israel has successfully done in large part. But at that time, it was not unreasonably thought that the peace process would facilitate that, and I think that that's correct. And that was accompanied by integration into sort of the cosmopolitan culture. And I think when the peace process broke down, there was a greater willingness to turn the back, as it were, on cosmopolitan culture, a Western cosmopolitan culture, or at least to integrate it with other forms of local types of things. That's a speculation on my part. You can buy it or not. I mean, that's,
and with that very provocative hanging in the air.